Well, right in the first seconds of his video, FudgeMuppet already shows a little bit of bias for the Stormcloaks. I mean, just look at the screen, Windhelm is on the background. You know those moments when people only show part of the truth, part of the facts, the ones that are convenient for them, and completely ignore the ones that would contradict their positions and/or that change the picture completely? Well, this is exactly what FudgeMuppet did in his video. There are many books and documents that contradict many things that FudgeMuppet said in this video. So if I mention the book, but forgot to post the link down below, please warn me. Anyway, let's continue.
In a few hours I will likely be dead. My men and I, nords of Skyrim all, will soon join the Emperor's legions to attack the Imperial city. The Aldmeri are entrenched within, and our losses will be severe. It is a desperate gambit, for if we do not reclaim the city, we will lose the war. Last night I prayed to mighty Talos for courage and strength in the battle to come. The horns are blowing and the banners are raised. The time has come to muster. May Talos grant us victory this day, and if I am found worthy, may I once again look upon the great feast hall. Over the centuries, the Imperials of Cyrodiil have often relied on their northern allies for aid in conflict. We can see this sentiment in the rousing words of Skardan Freewinter, who faced insurmountable odds at the Battle of the Red Ring. He is not alone in this sacrifice. When the Great War broke out between the Empire and the Aldmeri Dominion, General Jonna's Nord armies were exalted for their exceptional contribution in retaking the Imperial city. The forces of the Dominion had sacked the city, and when they attempted to break out to the south, they were blocked by the unbreakable shield wall of General Jonna's battered legions. Meanwhile, in the north, opportunistic Reachmen had capitalized on the Empire's war for the homeland. The Imperial legions stationed in Skyrim's western reaches had been called back to Cyrodiil to deal with the Aldmeri Dominion. The Reach's capital of Markarth was vulnerable, and the Forsworn took it with ease. Retaking the city was vital to maintaining a stable realm, yet the Empire was stretched close to snapping, and couldn't spare a single battalion for the task. They instead called upon a Nord militia led by the mighty Ulfric Stormcloak. A fascinating account of this Forsworn uprising comes from an Imperial scholar, whose conspicuous biases give us a good idea of the Empire's sentiment at the time.
You called an Imperial scholar biased for documenting what Ulfric did when he retook Markarth and after retaking Markarth from the Reachmen? Really? Or did I actually get you wrong and you referred to how the scholar described Ulfric's Stormcloak himself?
It claims, in all the bravado and epic yarns the skalds compose of his exploits, you would think Ulfric to be a giant of a man, equal to that of Tiber Septim in his cunning, leadership and decisive actions. But the truth is far more revealing. Before a peace treaty could be resolved with the Forsworn, a militia led by Ulfric Stormcloak sieged the gates of their capital Markarth. What happened during that battle was war, but what happened after the battle was over is nothing short of war crimes. Every official who worked for the Forsworn was put to the sword, even after they'd surrendered. Native women were tortured to give up names of Forsworn fighters who had fled the city or were in the hills of the Reach. Anyone who lived in the city, Forsworn and Nord alike, were executed if they had not fought with Ulfric and his men when they breached the gates. "You are with us or you are against Skyrim," was the message on Ulfric's lips as he ordered the deaths of shopkeepers, farmers, the elderly, and any child old enough to lift a sword that had failed in the call to fight with him. The truth of the incident is unclear, obscured by the bloody malaise of wartime. What is clear is the fact that the Nords were promised freedom of religion as a reward for the recapture of Markarth, but all they received were empty promises. In one fell swoop, the Empire revealed their willingness to bend to the demands of the Nords, and then immediately cede their authority to the Altmer, denying the Nords their prize, and going so far as to arrest Ulfric to prevent the ire of the Dominion.
Excuse me. The Empire? You mean Markarth, right? You mean Jarl Hrofdir and not the Emperor, right? Because as I hope you know, Cyrodiil gives a good degree of autonomy to the Empire's provinces, which is why in Skyrim each hold tracks its bounties separately, while in Cyrodiil a man who commits a crime on a certain county gets a bounty in every county, and also why Skyrim is still ruled by Jarls and a High King. With that said, Jarl Hrolfdir hoped the Dominion would not find out about Talos' worship in Markarth, and was pretty much forced to arrest Ulfric's militia to prevent another war, right after the Empire barely survived the previous one. And you talk like if the Empire as a whole wanted to simply give up Ulfric to the Dominion, completely ignoring the fact that the Dominion personally sent agents to demand Ulfric's arrest?
The Empire in their desperation may have hoped imprisonment would scare Ulfric into staying in line, but as that same Imperial scholar noted in his account of the Markarth incident, against the Bear of Markarth, Ulfric's Stormcloak, no is not an answer, and they would soon discover the folly of their actions. Hey guys, it's Drew here and welcome back to FudgeMuppet. We recently answered the question, who would be better to rule Tamriel, the Empire or the Aldmeri Dominion? And today we have a similar question to ask, who should rule the province of Skyrim, the Empire or the Stormcloaks? We've already covered the major mistake which served as the catalyst for the Stormcloak rebellion, but we're only at the tip of the iceberg, because the war for the North would brew to boiling point over the coming years. Throw off the shackles of Imperial oppression, do not bow to the yoke of a false emperor, be true to your blood, to your homeland. The Empire tells us we cannot worship holy Talos. How can man set aside a god? How can a true Nord of Skyrim cast aside the god that rose from our own heartland? Mighty Tiber Septim, himself the first emperor, conqueror of all Tamriel, ascended to godhood to sit at the right hand of Akatosh. Tiber Septim, a true son of Skyrim, born in the land of snow and blood, bred to the honour of our people, is now Talos, god of might and honour. The Empire has no right to tell us we cannot worship him.
Yeah. Keep acting like it wasn't the Thalmor Justiciars who do the whole thing, while the Imperials do their best to not enforce the terms of the White Coat Concordat. Oh, you don't believe me, do you? Well then, Undolamar complains about Jarl Igmund not aiding him in his investigations, to the point of asking help from a random adventurer he just met. There's literally a shrine of Talos in Markarth, and the Jarl has done nothing about it. The Imperial soldiers do not help Thalmor Justiciars around or guard the Thalmor embassy. The book Flight from the Thalmor tells the story of a bard who sang about Talos for a whole week in Markarth and the guards did nothing, and he was kidnapped by two Thalmor Justiciars in the early hours of the morning, and does not mention any Imperial soldier or guard aiding them. The book even says most people do not even know the Thalmor Justiciars exist, which just enforces the fact that the Thalmor mostly act alone, by lurking in the shadows. And the list goes on. Heck, Alvor even says that worshipping Talos was just fine before Ulfric's rebellion, which is just another proof the Empire does its best to not enforce the ban of Talos worship.
People are rightly stirred up about the damn Thalmor being allowed to roam around arresting people, just for worshipping Talos. But was it worth tearing Skyrim apart and maybe destroying the Empire? No. Ulfric will have a lot to answer for in the end. Nords have always supported the Empire, and the Empire has always been good for Skyrim. It's from that treaty that ended the Great War, remember? When the Emperor was forced by the Thalmor to outlaw Talos worship. We didn't pay much attention to it when I was a boy. Everyone still had their little shrine to Talos. But then, Ulfric and his sons of Skyrim started agitating about it. And sure enough, the Emperor had to crack down, dragging people off in the middle of the night. One of the main causes of this war, if you ask me.
Remember when I said FudgeMuppet was only using the sources that were convenient for him? Yeah.
In the immediate aftermath of the Markarth incident, Ulfric was in no position to start a rebellion, for he was imprisoned. He even missed his father's funeral and was forced to smuggle a written eulogy out of prison. Understandably, the tension was building in Skyrim and inside of the embittered new Jarl of Windhelm. He was soon released to take up his deceased father's mantle, but this would do little to blunt Ulfric's anger. Ulfric would not rest so long as the Empire dictated how the Nords lived and carried out their worship.
I technically already debunked this claim when talking about the Markarth incident, but I'll gladly do it again. Cyrodiil lets most of the laws and customs of each province be dictated by the rulers of the province itself, as long as they accept the Emperor's authority, pay the taxes, and aid the Empire when it needs. And this without mentioning the Imperials do their best to not enforce the ban of Talos worship, as I explained previously. So no, the Empire does not dictate how the Nords live and carry out their worship.
In the very same Stormcloak recruitment essay, attention is drawn to Skyrim's High King, who like many of the province's Jarls were staunch Imperial loyalists. Our own High King, Torig, betrayed us to the Empire. He traded our god for peace. He agreed to a pact with the Falmor signed by an emperor in a foreign land. Are we to be beholden to such a pact? No, 1,000 times no. Torig had been named High King around the same time Ulfric became Jarl of Windhelm. Ulfric and his allies in the Palace of Kings would argue Torig was unfit for rule, but he was heir apparent, so the traditional moot held to determine a new High King was only ever a formality.
No, it wasn't. Because it is the Jarls, and only the Jarls, who vote in the moot. The reason for Solitude usually being the seat of the High King is because the Nords have supported the Empire for countless generations. And as Solitude is the greatest supporter of the Empire in Skyrim, it is no surprise its Jarl is usually selected to become the next High King. And this is not against the Nord traditions by itself, as it is still the Jarls, and only the Jarls, voting for a High King. The tradition dictates the next High King must be elected on such moot, and if the Jarls decide to select the most Imperial supporting Jarl to be the next High King, so be it, because it is not against the traditions that you Stormcloaks keep agitating about.
At the moot, Ulfric announced his desire to be independent from the Empire, and while the request was a substantial one, Torig respected Ulfric as the war veteran he was. But Ulfric was running short of patience, and the next time he came to Solitude's Blue Palace, it was to challenge the young monarch. Ancient Nordic traditions forced Torig's hand, and the two duelled. The young High King was no match for the war hero's Fum, and while sources are divided on whether it was the shout or the sword that defeated Torig, they couldn't deny that, honourable or not, custom dictated that Ulfric was now rightfully the High King of Skyrim.
Wrong. In the first volume of Pocket Guide to the Empire, on the book about Skyrim, it is stated that the moot was created to choose the next king from qualified members of the royal family, but that with the death of King Borgas, the last member of Isgormor dynasty, the moot failed to choose the right member as it became partisan and ineffective, what resulted in the War of Succession. The book reveals that after that, quote-unquote, the moot was convened only when a king died without direct heirs, and it has fulfilled this more limited role admirably. So no, Ulfric is not the rightful king of Skyrim yet, because the death of Torig means that a moot should be convened to choose the next High King. Then you say, but Jorunn the Scout King and Kiorik the White became High Kings after defeating the previous kings on traditional duels. And I say, wrong as well, because both these duels happened when the throne was empty. As it is revealed by the book The Crown of Freydis, when Azur Icebreaker, a mighty tribal chieftain, was selected by the moot to be the next High King, he was put to the test of the Crown of Verity, a crown that was specially made by wizards sent from each and every hole of Skyrim to test the worth of potential candidates for the title of High King. But the crown rejected Azur. It literally refused to be placed upon his head, and he threatened to summon his followers to kill every member of the moot if they didn't name him as the rightful High King. That was when a soft-spoken member of the moot got up from his chair and challenged him to a duel, and in said duel, Azern was struck down. The soft-spoken member who defeated the mighty Azern was Kiorik the White, who became the next High King of Skyrim. In the case of Jorunn the Scald King, it is all revealed in the book called The Brothers' War. His mother, the High Queen of Eastern Skyrim and the wearer of the Crown of Verity, was killed by the Akaviri when they invaded Windhelm, and that Jorunn, who was Jorunn the Scald Prince at the time, alongside his brother Fildgor, who was Fildgor's strong prince at the time, his Dunmer allies, and the Argonians who unexpectedly joined in them, defeated the Akaviri by driving them back into the sea, drowning them by the thousands. And this mighty deed was what allowed the creation of the Ebonheart Pact, by the way. Fildgor stepped forward to claim rulership afterwards, but Jorunn refused to support him as he thought Fildgor was too violent and ruthless to be a good ruler. Enraged, Fildgor rallied the Stormfist clan, his longtime greatest allies, and all the others who supported him in Eastern Skyrim, and Jorunn challenged him to a duel to prevent a civil war. After a long and exhausting fight, Jorunn shattered Fildgor's weapon and demanded his surrender. With no other option, Fildgor surrendered, and Jorunn reluctantly exiled his brother afterwards. Thus, Jorunn the Scald Prince became Jorunn the Scald King, the High King of Skyrim during the Three Banners War. As you can see, in both cases, the duels happened while the throne was empty, while there was no High King or High Queen ruling Skyrim, which was not the case of Ulfric when he defeated High King Torygg. Therefore, what is revealed in the first edition of Pocket Guide to the Empire means Ulfric is not the rightful High King until the mood elects him as High King.
But this would count for little with the province in the midst of civil war. Unlike the Imperial account of the Markarth incident, this particular display of Ulfric's brutality is not skewed by the Empire's bias, and his brash actions are important to consider when determining who should rule Skyrim. Sybil Stentor, Solitude's court wizard, reaffirms this idea. She knew Torygg well, having raised him as a youth. She was convinced Torygg's admiration for Ulfric would have added a lot of credence to Ulfric's request. Independence from the Empire was absolutely a possibility without needing to take Skyrim's throne by force, and Ulfric's failure to exhaust diplomatic alternatives would be a stigma forever attached to his character. Regardless, Ulfric had achieved his goal. His rebellion was in full swing, and the Empire could not count on peace in the north. No sooner than the blood of High King Torygg had dried, Ulfric took flight back to his seat in Windhelm. The Jarls of the Rift, Winterhold and the Pale favoured the rebels, while the Jarls of the Reach, Falkreath and Hjalmarch chose the side of the Empire's candidate, Torygg's widow Jarl Elisif the Fair of Huffinger. Skyrim was split in half. In the east were the Stormcloak rebels, in the west the Imperial loyalists. With the Aldmeri Dominion choosing to take a backseat to the conflict, the civil war could go either way. Perhaps the outcome would rely on the choices of one individual, the last Dragonborn. But we're not going to analyse the civil war itself. We could break down the approximate sizes of each army, the leaders and strategists involved, even the landscape of Skyrim and the defensive capabilities of the major cities. Instead, we're going to look at each faction's claim to Skyrim, and their potential to better rule the province. Under whose governance would the populace be most happy? Who would best protect the Nords from the alarming ambitions of the Aldmeri Dominion? Well, one thing is clear. If the Empire were anywhere close to being as powerful as they've been historically, the Stormcloak rebellion would have been snuffed out in a matter of days.
Wrong. Once again, the Empire is keeping the vast majority of its men in the southern border with the Aldmeri Dominion to not weaken Cyrodiil's defenses, which is why Cyrodiil has sent very few reinforcements and the Legion has been forced to recruit locally in Skyrim. Therefore, the vast majority of Skyrim's legionnaires are locally recruited and inexperienced men. The general dialogue of pretty much any legate in the game, and a possible dialogue from General Tullius during Season Unending, reveal this quite clearly.
You mean Ulfric's so-called Stormcloak rebellion? The Nord kings, excuse me, Jarls. They can't seem to control their own people, so the Legion has stepped in to keep order. Sadly, the Empire's stretched a little thin these days, and we've gotten very few reinforcements. So we've been forced to recruit locally. But rest assured, citizen, we'll put an end to this uprising, and things will get back to normal soon enough.
Fair enough. We're driving the Stormcloaks back well enough at the moment, but we're already overstretched. That's what comes of trying to win a war with a bare handful of legions. If the Emperor would just give me the reinforcements I've requested. Most of the Legion is tied down on the border with the Altmeri Dominion. The Emperor can't afford to risk weakening Cyrodiil's defenses. From the Imperial City, our war here is just a sideshow. An interlude before the main event against the Thalmor resumes. Yes, fine. I'll come to this Greybeard Council. For all the good it will do.
So, my dear viewers, this is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you aren't subscribed yet, and I'll see you all on the next video. Look through. Looking,